Welcome back to another edition of the Supply Chaney podcast, the podcast where we talk to the experts in supply chain, both those kind of closer to the front lines, making things happen, and those also in the corner offices that kind of structure the supply chains and logistics, and then those folks that are the glue that holds everything together. And today we're going to be talking about one of those elements of the glue that holds things together, and that is the people in supply chain, and more specifically, the talent acquisition, the recruiting, the hiring and firing, and just the people side of supply chains. And our guest today is Jay Webb, who is the founder of the Goats of Growth. I would nominate him and his business for one of the best company names of the year, for sure, that I'm aware of. And happy to have him come on. It's not his first time behind a microphone. He's got like 100 more podcasts produced than I do. So I'll take some notes while we're having this conversation too. Jay, if you could take a minute and introduce people to yourself a little bit and let them know what you're all about.
Thanks, Nathan. Nice to be on for sure and be on this other side of the mic. First of all, as you just mentioned, I do have a podcast of the same name, The Goats of Growth. And the true story is that the podcast was renamed from, I believe it was called Over Quota at one point. And then I decided to rename the podcast The Goats of Growth because it's aspirational, inspirational. As you mentioned, it's like there's a goat and, it's a lexicon, part of the American, at least, lexicon in terms of the greatest of all time. So I decided, geez, this sounds so aspirational, inspirational. My original company name was the J. David Group, David being my middle name. And then I decided, you know what? The podcast is a great name. I'm going to name my company The Goats of Growth as well. So essentially they've merged. And speaking of supply chain, they ultimately feed each other, right? So I have go-to-market professionals on, founders of technology companies, that early to growth stage tech companies that are coming on to talk about vision, execution, and strategy. And we walk through that conversation. And on the other side, obviously, you have candidates who are interested in these conversations and interested in the people who are hiring, making the decisions. I have somebody on today that I'm interviewing to talk about this new agentic world and how AI and AI adoption is affecting go-to-market operations and strategy. So just something that I've been fascinated with. And since I've had these conversations for basically 20 years. My gosh, I can't believe it. Privately, I decided, you know what? Why don't I just turn it into a podcast? So that's where the podcast angle comes from. And then more specifically, as far as what I do, as you mentioned, talent acquisition and recruiting. Again, I've been in the game for 20 years, primarily focusing on early to growth stage tech companies. Over the years, that's evolved from where it was just individual contributor SDRs to individual contributing AEs to helping companies find go-to-market leaders, so chief revenue officers, VPs of sales, and so forth. A couple of years ago, I met someone who was running a warehouse automation, the founder of a warehouse automation company. Really was fascinated by I'd say the major problems that their technology was solving and specifically for warehouse automation and optimization. And I started talking to a lot of candidates in the supply chain warehousing space. And over time, I was able to help them find several people for their go-to-market team as they had just raised a Series A. And I decided, you know what, like this is a good area for me to focus on, like operational technology, supply chain technology, warehousing technology, and so forth. Converted my company into a marketplace and then very quickly realized that marketplaces are hard to build and decided, you know what, why don't I create some sort of an agentic operation of my own? So I learned Claude Code, started building AI agents for my own recruiting business to increase my own operational efficiency. And, Nathan, just like I'm sure, right? Like, and by the way, speaking of supply chains, Amazon is a perfect example, right? Where everybody wants things faster and cheaper, but still with the same amount of quality, right? And so what I decided to do was, okay, well, how do I speed up my own recruiting? Meaning, how do I shorten the time that someone says, hey, Jay, we need to hire, to the time that person is filled, right? And last time I just did it in 10 days because I have the ability to have the right people sourced with my AI agent that I use. And then I'm able to get them to the hiring managers a lot quicker. So instead of, where an average recruiting cycle might take 60 days, cutting it in half just because of that speed and time to value. So just fascinated with the whole thing of just, supply chain of the candidates all the way down to the delivery, frankly, of, the end product at the within the client's company.
I like the visual of thinking about, the talent pipeline and delivery and whatnot as a supply chain of its own. I suppose supply chains are all nothing but little mini supply chains all built together into a bigger supply chain. So,
Yeah.
um, let's rewind the tape a little bit here and kind of pull out the family photo albums for a second and tell us a little bit about, Jay, where you grew up. What kind of kid were you? Were you the athlete? Were you the librarian? What kind of student were you? What did you think you wanted to be when you grow up? Kind of walk us back in time some.
It's funny when you say the athlete or the librarian, because I spend so much time in the library now. And sometimes even on Fridays, because the local library here in Melrose, Massachusetts, by the way, which is where I grew up and which is where I live now, it closes at 5 o'clock on Fridays. And usually the last to leave, and they're basically like booting me out. But, you talk 30 years ago, or geez, I can't even remember how long it's been now. Back in high school, almost a little over 30 years ago. I'm never walking into the library. They couldn't push me into the library. Never mind push me out of the library. So I was actually just talking to somebody yesterday as I was leaving my daughter's basketball game, and we were talking about the books that they needed to read over the summertime. And I was very honest. I said, maybe I read one or two books all through high school because I had a short attention span. And as I've learned over the years, I'm more of a visual learner, more of an auditory learner. So I do like just even now before, I'm not sure if it was on video or not, but I was talking about how I learned Claude Code. And I learned Claude Code just because I was able to just sort of like look at, have the screens in front of me and actually do it. And part of that is experiential learning, as opposed to just sort of sitting in a classroom and learning or sitting there and reading. So I was never inspired to learn. But I will say what that taught me, or what that even built over time, I think and probably was always there, was my curiosity, right? And I use my curiosity, I think, is if I were to have one superpower, I'd say it's my curiosity, right? Because I realized that I'm playing behind, maybe because I hadn't read as many books, right? And so as a result, I'm constantly trying to fuel that, which is also why I have a podcast, right? Because I'm very interested in the subjects that I'm interviewing. Actually, even why I like recruiting, right? Because I feel like every conversation is a way for me to learn something new, something I didn't learn before, even if it's not necessarily about the function of, let's say, sales, but that particular person's experience and how they actually do things, right? And so I was as a kid, I was an athlete for sure. Like I played. Actually, my first sport was bowling. I was actually on the bowling team. My friend's dad was candlepin. I'm talking like really small balls, not the big balls, because I'm in Massachusetts and that it's native here. I remember my grandmother, while she was folding laundry, would watch candlepin bowling. And so I was like at 8, 9 years old. I probably even have some of the bowling trophies behind me, maybe. I'm a hoarder. And so I did that. And then basketball, football, baseball, like just an athlete all the time, which is probably why I was never spending a lot of time in the library, because I was often on the fields. And so that's was my upbringing in. And one of the things, my drive, frankly, when I was growing up was I realized one thing is that I didn't want to have a boss. So if I didn't want a boss, I'd better be a professional athlete. But when the professional athlete thing started to not necessarily pan out, I remember going into college very early, I was thinking, all right, at some point, you're going to have to run your own business. You just have to. Like, you just have to run your own business. I didn't know what that business was going to be. I thought it was going to be like an advertising agency, because that's right. I sort of majored in communication, minored in marketing. And then, over time, it evolved. And I remember one day, I'd been buying and selling houses as just sort of a side hustle, so to speak. I had left my first job, which was enterprise rent-a-car. And I remember I was in Las Vegas with one of my friends, just hanging out on vacation. I didn't have a job. One of my former employees asked me some advice about what she should do next, and she was approached by a recruiter, a headhunter. And I surmised to her, I said, "Well, I don't really know much about what this guy does, but it sounds to me like if he knows anything about, if he's good at what his job is, he should be doing." He should tell you to get into recruiting. That's what I said. And so when I told her that, I realized that's where I should be. And so that's when I jumped into recruiting. So I know you asked me about the early Jay Webb, but that's sort of like the whole mindset even then, which was I can't have a boss. So if you can't have a boss, you got to figure it out. And if you're going to figure it out, you have to start your own business. What is that business going to be? And then for me, here we are sitting here today.
I have to say I had somewhat of a similar concept. I worked a dozen or so years in the industry, but I always knew in the back of my head I would have my own business or two or three. Never any clue what they were going to be.
Okay.
But I knew that was kind of like going to be my retirement plan. That was going to be the second, part of this party.
Yeah.
I just didn't know what it was going to be, and it was just going to organically appear. And that's where we're at today, right? Just it all kind of all the puzzle pieces fall in.
For sure.
Let's talk a little bit about deciding to major in communications. I know that I think that when I was in school, we kind of always joked that like communications is what you did if you didn't really know what you wanted to do. But now I feel like as adults and professionals, we're like, oh my gosh, communications is actually what it's all about. So tell me a little about that decision to major in that and kind of what career path you thought you were going to get on there.
Well, it's funny. I started off actually poli-sci. Because my mother, as I was growing up, speaking of growing up, was like, you should be a lawyer because you're such a good arguer, right? You always like to argue. You should be a lawyer. And so they're like, well, if you're going to be a lawyer, you should probably major in political science. I'm not even sure why that was. The 17-year-old Jay Webb, 18-year-old Jay Webb was told that. So I'm like, okay, cool. But then I realized very early in my freshman year that there was not something that was going to be exciting or interesting to me, maybe because of all the reading. So I said, you know what, let me get out of that. And then I chose communication actually because of my voice, to be honest with you, because there were people who were like, oh yeah, you got such a radio voice. Maybe you should go into, something with your voice. And so I was like, geez, maybe I can be the announcer for the Chicago Bulls. I was like, but my college wasn't necessarily application. It was more theory. It was about public speaking. It was about organizational communication. It was about, all of the things. Frankly, it's funny, like what I use in my world now, right? Like just organizational communication, interpersonal communication, public, like the things that we're doing now. And so that really resonated with me and stuck for what you just alluded to, which is like, countries go to war because of a lack of communication, right? Like people, like misunderstandings happen when there's a lack of communication. I'm here in Boston, and if you listen to the fallout of Jaylen Brown getting traded, it's just a freaking disaster. Right. And the communication after that was terrible. Right. Like, actually, I remember I did one of my term paper, my senior year was crisis management, essentially. Right. And at the end of the day, the Celtics handled that end of the trade horribly. Right. They didn't say anything for, I think, 3 days after the actual trade happened. And then when they got in front of the microphones, it was a dog and pony show. It wasn't really, I don't think it was handled well at all, right? And so if you look at so many different and Jaylen Brown has very hard feelings about the Celtics, right? And I feel like if communication were better, then the feelings wouldn't be as harsh. And even Jason Tatum, right, his running mate, I mean, he didn't come out with anything and say, hey, oh, it was my bro. I like play with him. And for like another couple of days. And that was after he started getting flack on, on socials, and Jaylen was kind of alluding to the fact that the team hadn't reached out. So to me, anyways, communication was something then. It was like, this seems like, even though I initially went into it for the application of, which is funny because here I have a podcast, right? but because I initially went into it for that, it ends up being so many more things, I think, that have applied and served me well over the years.
All right. Well, if we kind of scoot through that sort of stage of life and becoming into adulthood, you're not the first person who worked at enterprise car sales and car rental that I've had on the podcast. It feels like a good starting ground for lots of folks. Tell me a little bit about your experience there.
Yeah, that goes back into my whole entrepreneurial business owner mindset. When I was a junior at my college, Stonehill College, they had come to recruit people because, at the time, and maybe they still are, the number one recruiter of recent college grads. And, I hadn't even heard of them, obviously, as a junior in college. But when they came in, I remember them. One of the things that stuck with me was they said that if you come to Enterprise Rent-A-Car, we put you through the management training program. You'll learn how to run your own business. You'll learn, business account, financial accounting. You'll learn sales. You'll learn marketing. You'll learn management. You'll learn all of those things, because if you become a manager in one of our offices, you'll be able to apply all those things. And so again, I was only a junior. I still had another year to go, but that stuck with me. it's like I said, I wasn't at that point. I certainly wasn't going to the NBA, and I was like, I need to figure out a way to eventually run a business. And I know I wasn't going to get my MBA either because I was just like, I knew that. I mean, I barely got through college just because of the finances, not because, but just because it was just so expensive. And I was like, I can't imagine like just going to and paying for more school. Like I got to get out there and work. And I don't like my parents aren't going to be able to help me. So it's like, all right, I just got to learn as much as I can about this whole business thing as possible. So that's why I decided to go to enterprise, and I took it for all it was worth. Right. And I worked so hard there. I was just on the surface. You're just renting cars. I was there, honestly, Nathan. I've always had a strong work ethic. I remember getting to my office sometimes at like, I'd say like, so the office would open at 8 a.m. And by the way, I wasn't even a manager yet at this point. I was just a management trainee. I had been there for maybe 3 months, and I'd be walking into the office because you'd have like a key. I'd walk into the office at probably like sometimes before 6 a.m. My manager, the boss wasn't there. Nobody was there. I was just there super, super early, and the thing didn't open for 2 hours. And I just wanted to like get whatever the work that I needed to get done, which was you had to call up renters because we would essentially their insurance companies and body shops would refer people to Enterprise Rent a Car. And so we had to get our callbacks done to make sure that those cars were getting paid for and all that stuff. Right. And so I just wanted to make sure that I had everything, even though those offices weren't open yet either. Right? Like they weren't open until like 8 or 9, but I was just there early. Anyway. Maybe I was cleaning cars, moving cars. I don't know what I was doing. I just wanted to get there extra early so I could hit the ground running. And then at times I would leave the office at like 8 o'clock at night. I remember one time when I moved up as a manager, I remember I came home. I left the office probably 7 o'clock at night, came home, got a bite to eat. I was like 45 minutes away from my house. I put the air mattress in the car, drove back to the office, put the air mattress in the office, slept in the office because I wanted to get to the office really, really early the next day because I had just a lot of paperwork that I had to do on top of actually dealing with like managing people, managing costs, like, pay attention to customers, like all that stuff. I remember at 3 o'clock in the morning, I got up to like, I don't know I think I got up to get a drink to go to the bathroom, something like that. The alarm went off in the building because it was just, I can't even remember exactly how that was resolved. But yeah, that's why I chose enterprise because I just wanted to learn everything I could about running a business, and I certainly did.
I appreciate the hustle that you can probably look back and see that you had within yourself back then. And you think about if you're going to be an entrepreneur, like you've got to have that built-in sort of sense of urgency and wanting to get stuff done, even when nobody's looking, when you aren't really expected to do that, because when you're running your own daily schedule, you've got no one else telling you when to be there or when to show up, what to get done. So I think, you can see when we start looking back at our lives that we kind of had some of these ingredients that we needed to be builders of things later on, even, and we exhibited those characteristics early on in our careers.
Yeah, that's right.
Maybe let's fast forward through the next couple, stages. What happened after enterprise? Any long-term decisions made while you were there, and that still play into your life today? And what came after that?
Just as an aside, because I am just this is my personality. When I was at Enterprise, I remember one night, couldn't go to sleep. I remember seeing an infomercial about land in Bentonville, Arkansas, Bella Vista in particular, Bella Vista, Arkansas, which is northwest Arkansas. And I ended up, because you were talking about like long-term decisions, I ended up buying land there, about little more than a third of an acre. And I remember trying to convince one of my bosses to go with me to Arkansas to look at some land because I was actually close with him. Shout out to Mike Toth. And, but he didn't want to go. And I ended up going down there and buying land. And I still have that land. It's paid off, and I'm getting text messages and calls every day, for that land. Because obviously that is it was really fast growing 20 years ago, and it's still growing really, really fast now. So anyways, that was the decision that I made then. And then also supplementing with that is I left there, as I was alluding to when I left Enterprise, because I was there for 7.5 years. I decided I was going to buy and sell houses, which I was doing. I was doing anyways there, which is part of the land thing, but I had been doing that So I guess that was part of the long-term thing in terms of just like doing that, but which led me to where I am, right? Because what happened was in 2004, 2005, I had bought a three family here in Gloucester, Massachusetts, really close to the ocean, which is where I met my wife, actually, which is where we met at the enterprise office. And I had owned something else at the time. I think it was in Coral Gables, Florida. My best friend lived down there, and we bought a new condo conversion down there. And we were going to flip them, but we realized we couldn't flip them because the market was just turning. And there was a lot of competition for what we were building. And, there's all kinds of different exits you have when you buy something. You can buy and hold, you can buy and flip, you can buy and convert and then sell, right? All different kinds of things we could do, but we ended up just holding. And while we were holding, I was like, all right, I'm not getting this infusion of cash. I better do something. What am I going to do? Right. And that thing was when I was in Las Vegas, and I talked to Melissa, who was the person who used to work for me. And I was like, that's when I gave her that advice. And then that whole thing led to recruiting. And then even I'll go a step deeper. When I first got into recruiting, it was a company called American Personnel. They changed the name now. I think it's AP Staffing. But I had two choices at that point. I knew I wanted to do recruiting. One thing about me is I make up my mind pretty easily. I'm pretty definite about what I want to do, but I'm also nimble in my thinking, right? In other words, it's like, I can be certain about something, but I'm also comfortable with shifting as well, right? And making no apologies for it. And so, but one thing I knew for sure is that I was going to go into recruiting. That's just what I was going to do, right? I had two companies that I was interviewing with, got offers from both. One company did sales recruiting, sales and marketing, go to market. It wasn't even called go to market back then. It was just sales and marketing. And then the other one didn't. They did accounting and finance. Guess which one I chose?
I'm guessing it'd be the sales and marketing, or maybe it's not. Maybe it's a trick question.
Exactly. Trick question. I went to do accounting and finance. The reason I went to the accounting and finance one was because they didn't do sales and marketing, and I'm a builder. and I wanted to build, right? So I didn't want to do something that other people were doing. So they went and I was like, hey, I want to build a sales and marketing team division. They're like, yeah, sure, go right ahead. So I was like, hey, perfect. That's what I did. So then I started there and then built that up. And I was competing with the company that I didn't go to, right? And we were like butting heads, running into each other, like in the market, right? And that was fun for me, right? And then I hired people within the organization and all this other stuff, right? And yeah, so then I remember a couple of years in, because that's how I am. I get like antsy, and I'm always pushing myself to do more. I'm like, I can. The same thing, by the way. I was getting into the office even earlier. I was getting in the office at I remember one time I looked at my phone there, or my computer. It was 4:55 a.m. in this office that I was working in Boston. And it was like a 30-minute drive into the office without traffic, maybe 15. I'd take the train sometimes, depending on how poor or broke I was at the time, how much credit card debt I had at the time. And yeah, so I was getting in the office at 4:55 in the morning. I would leave sometimes at 9 o'clock at night, depending on, what was going on. I was going in the weekends. I was asking that I got a pass to go in the weekends. I was recording actually even then. I don't know if you know Gary Vaynerchuk, but he had a thing called the Wine Library. And so I had this thing called the Candidate Showcase, where I would put up a little tripod and I would just talk to the tripod camera, and I would go over just like Gary Vaynerchuk would review wines, I would review candidates, and I would talk about, oh, I brought this fantastic candidate today. She has this and she has that, reach out to me if you want to talk to her, just trying to get super creative. And then I had a podcast called, it wasn't even called Over Quota at the time. It was actually called Inside the Interview, kind of like the Inside the Actors Guild, something like that. So I would do those kind of things, right? So it was always, so what I'm doing now, again, to your question, what I'm doing now, there are certainly, it was the elements of it then, right? It's just sort of evolved with the technology and who I'm talking to and the conversations that I'm having, but it's always kind of been the same deal, right? And even, some points now, as I have a family now, so I have to, one great thing about running my own business and not having a board of directors and I'm a funded company or anything by any stretch of the imagination. So I definitely have time freedom as well, but it also means that, if I need to be with my kids who are 13 and 11, sometimes it also means, okay, I'm going to go and leave the house now at 9 p.m. I'm going to go to the nearest hotel down the street, and I'm going to work for a couple of hours there just because I got to get out of the house. I can't stay in my office. It's just, I'm going to fall asleep at my desk, but I'll go to the Courtyard Marriott. They have Wi-Fi. I'll sit there and just sort of work until whenever I need to go home. So, yeah, there's definitely, you talk about decisions then and sort of the elements and how it relates to where I am now. I mean, that's all it, right? So
Well, let's zoom in a little bit on where you are now, and let's talk a little bit about the goats of growth. What is it exactly, kind of that you do? You've alluded to, we've made some hints throughout the conversation, but what kind of service do you provide? Who is your ideal customer, and why have you kind of picked this lane, that particular lane or that niche to focus on?
first and foremost, I mean, I just, after working at Enterprise Rent a Car, I just knew that salespeople and just, again, go to market now are my jam, right? I just the energy, the competitiveness, the measurables, the accountability, it's all there, right? We're all wired the same way. I talk to a lot of people, they go, you should go into sales. I go, what the hell do you think I've been doing for 20 years? Like, how do you think I do this and keep going? So for me, it was just fascinating. And then more specifically, when I first started at American Personnel back in the day and then starting my own company, I wanted to work with the underdogs, right? I wanted to work with the companies that nobody heard of. I wanted shorter sales cycles, right? I didn't want sort of go through procurement and all this other stuff to try to get my contracts out. I wanted to be working with the founders. I wanted to work with the CROs, the VPs of sales, people who have the power of the purse, so to speak, like they control the budget and they have a high sense of urgency to grow. So that is always fascinating for me. And again, go to market in general is amazing. And then when you niche it down, right? Like for a while, I was more call it agnostic. I'd be recruiting for a sales and marketing software today, and then I'd be recruiting for a cybersecurity company as well, and I'd be recruiting for all different kinds of things. But at some point, I had to. There's a couple of things. I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth here a little bit here, so just bear with me. But at some point, I had to pick a winner, and the winner, because I had success and really excited about that one company I was alluding to, and then a couple of others that I was like, maybe I'll just stick with supply chain, warehouse automation, all that, right? Because especially in the age of AI and how quickly I feel like operational technology, supply chain, software, all of that is how quickly these companies are adopting it and the enormous problems that are being solved. Because supply chain is no easy, beast to overcome, right? There's so many complexities and so many different, avenues, that can affect the outcome of it, right? In just so many different ways, from getting drugs from freaking one part of the earth to, in my house, let's just say, right? Like me picking it up at the store, right? And there was a company called, I won't say the name, but just a client of mine. And it was just fascinating how they tracked packages as far as where they came from. It was just always interesting to me. And so I decided that this is a really good niche to focus on for sure, right? But then candidly, once I started building my AI agents and realized the breadth that I could cover with AI and with agents makes my life easier, right? So I had to pick a full winner before I could build agents, because there's only so much time that I could spend on building pipeline, on building relationships with people. But now that I have this co-pilot, so to speak, and I think my agents go beyond co-pilot, but I can handle more, right? In terms of still working but still within the same sphere, if you will, right? So for instance, like operational technology I mentioned, right? Companies that are call it improving the technology that is operated within or that's used within manufacturing facilities that are making warehousing more efficient, right? Like the things that people are actually, the technology that people are actually using within these factories and to make workers more efficient, like those kinds of things are fascinating. And then if you look at cybersecurity, it's the same thing, right? It's cybersecurity touches every facet, frankly, of the supply chain and everywhere, right? And so to focus on those companies as well that are securing the operational technology, right? That are securing various aspects of making sure that the fully automated drones that are moving through warehouses are not getting corrupted, and that they're so there's so many different things that are fascinating, and so many different use cases that get me excited to talk about. And I love working with companies that are solving like major problems and also again, founders, entrepreneurs who have the same sort of vigor and energy to get up and get after it and make something happen every day. Like it's just endlessly fascinating to me.
I want to kind of take a minute to kind of dive into the weeds on the exact kind of roles that you focus on. We talk about go to market and sales and marketing. I think particularly on the business development sort of sales side, that is, I would imagine, the area of supply chains and logistics that has the most turnover. And you've kind of like basically, I feel like zeroed in on the area of the industry that requires the most constant maintenance and attention and work to keep that that workforce of business development folks on the bench. I don't know. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, unwittingly, when I went into the business, I hadn't even thought of that, right? It wasn't even like on my radar. But to your point, as I've gone into deeper into my career, I mean, it is something that is true, right? It's almost like the supply, it's endless supply chain. I always looked at it like supply chain, meaning that working with a small company that has no salespeople, a one salesperson or whatever, and then being the person to help them grow from 1 to 50 salespeople, right? That was the vision, right? Like, I'm going to grow go-to-market teams, right? And it's happened like multiple times, right? Over and over again, right? And it's fascinating because I love it. I'm a builder. I love being part of that. I love watching the companies that I'm helping build and grow and all that stuff, right? It's just fantastic. But to your point, also what happens within that, right, is they're growing, right? There's attrition that happens, especially, by the way, early, right? Because hiring is just a hypothesis to begin with, right? Especially the early hires. It's just a hypothesis. Like, hey, Jay, this is what we need. We need somebody with 2 years of experience selling to, Fortune, 1,000 companies, average deal size is between 100, whatever, right? Whatever the hypothesis is, they sort of go through, right? But it is really just a hypothesis. And you're going to be right or you're going to be wrong. And oftentimes what happens, especially at the early growth stage companies, is the people that are early on are not the people that are going to be the best fit, let's say, after the Series B, as an example, right? As they start to scale, because you just have different traits that are needed. I think you need builders. You need people that are comfortable with ambiguity. You need people who are have grit, very comfortable with accountability. And then as you grow, then you need people that are more coachable, that are going to follow a process, that are team players. Like, there's so many different things. And what happens is that you look back and you're like, okay, well, these people that we have now, all of a sudden you start wanting to replace them, or they don't even feel like it's their place anymore, right? Like they're like, what is this? Like, I talk to people all the time. It's like, yeah, the culture changed after the acquisition, culture changed after this. Often, and here's another thing that happens too at the very top. And by the way, so the tenure at VP of sales level CRO is about 18 months. Okay, 18 months, right? Exactly. It's really, really short. Right? It's really short, right? But if you think about it, and what I'm going to say is that a lot of times company will hire someone who's their founding CRO, founding VP of sales, and they are sub $10 million, right? Let's say they're sub, and they're going to try to, the goal is for that person to get them to, say, double digit millions, right? 10 million, 20 million, 30 million, something like that, right? Ideally, that person will take them from 1 to 100 million and so forth, right? People like Mark Roberge from HubSpot, Chris Degnan from Snowflake, whose book, actually both those books are behind me. You even look at like the PTC, John McMahon, who essentially is like the founder of MedPick. Those are rare people who can do it. Oftentimes what happens is, and I've told my clients this as well, is like, likely you're going to be looking for a new person to replace that person. As soon as you guys get to like whatever, like as soon as you're going from 2 million to 10 million or 10 million to 20 million, you're going to need somebody that's going to get you from 20 million to, 50, 60 million, something like that. Then you're going to need somebody that's going to get you from 60 million to like plus, right? It's just, there's all different personality, not just personality traits, but just sort of skill sets, if you will, right? So yeah, it's certainly a high turnover at the top. And then what happens is at the top, because there's turnover at the top, then there's turnover throughout the organization as well, right? Because when a leader changes, all of a sudden the new leader comes in and they're going to have their own set of values as well and what they see, right? And they want to put their imprint on it. They're making an impact and they see like, oh geez, like these people are great for that, gritty, grimy kind of a stage that they were just at, right? But I need scale up people. I need people that can operationalize and follow process and do all that stuff, right? And so that's why it's from the top down why there's so much turnover. So from my perspective, it's one of those things where, I when I talk to people, when I talk to candidates, that's one of the things that we screen for is, are you comfortable with ambiguity? Why do you want to do this? Like, and frankly, have you done it before, right? A lot of these companies want people that have seen this particular movie before, right? And sometimes you get lucky. Like one of the CROs that I placed towards the end of last year, he did it. He was like from 10 million, I think, to 100 million plus at one company, right? And that's what my client was looking for, along with the domain expertise and all the other stuff that he wanted me to find in this person, right? And that's very hard to find in one person. So yeah, that's really what it is. There's definitely a lot of turnover there. It keeps me busy because of that. You're never going to have a shortage. You're never going to have a shortage of candidates. The challenge isn't necessarily the supply of the candidates. It's really the supply of the candidate. I'm not even going to say the best candidates. It's the supply of the candidates that are going to be matching the moment, matching the need of the particular market, of the need of the client. And one other thing I'll say, because I'm just like all in on AI. The people who are not necessarily paying attention and actually rolling up their sleeves and being experiential with this stuff, with actually like learning, because you can't learn to ride a bike by reading a book. You can't necessarily learn this stuff by just sort of like going on Chat GPT or Gemini or whatever, right? You actually have to get your hands dirty and figure out how to build workflows and all that other stuff if you want to be if you want to make it in the next generation of go-to-market.
I now feel a little foolish for thinking that the reason for turnover kind of in the biz dev area of supply chain was just lack of performance. But what's interesting and what you've kind of highlighted for me here is it's actually just as companies grow, what they want and need in that sort of division just changes kind of more dramatically maybe than in other areas of the business. It doesn't scale as easily with the same folks, on the bench there. So yes. I appreciate you for kind of, opening up my field of view there a little bit and understanding that better.
Yeah, for sure. And go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, let's kind of start wrapping things up here a little bit. Is there anything that you want to make sure that we leave the audience with as we kind of wrap things up here today?
Thank you. That's a good question. No, just listen, if you want to hear more of me or learn more about how I can help your companies, or frankly, if you're a candidate looking to make a transition, if you're a sales leader and so forth, just reach out to me for sure. But follow my podcast, right? Follow the Goats of Growth. I'm going to be releasing a bunch of new episodes over the next month or so, and then continually for every week for the rest of the year and so forth. And we're going to be talking about exactly what I've been alluding to here, what I was just alluded to there at the end, which is the level of AI adoption and agent adoption within go-to-market and how it's affecting growth, profitability, and headcount. Actually,
right,
and how that's all working, and frankly, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Because I have the good and bad and the ugly on my part. I'd like to hear it from everybody else. We can learn from each other.
I like it. I appreciate you taking a minute to walk us through kind of what I think early on was Jay Webb, the entrepreneur story, and kind of just being able to see that from the sidelines was a treat. And I'm sure that there was some nuggets of wisdom in there for folks, not just people that are maybe on the business development go-to-market side of the house, but in business and in the supply chain industry in general. So Thanks for your time. And I will keep an eye out for when your next episodes come out.
Awesome. Much appreciated. Thanks, Nathan.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.